As Your Heart Betrays You, Part 21. A Miraculous Ladybug Fanfiction written and narrated by Mira Rose. Artwork for the opening and thumbnail image by Evenart Adam on Instagram and Tumblr, linked in the description box. Such good art, go check them out. And if you haven't heard the previous 20 parts, those are also linked in the description box. Now then, if you've made it to part 21 and haven't subscribed, go do that, please. Please. It really helps. And leave a like and a comment. If you don't know what to comment, put red. Because by the time you guys are listening to this, Taylor Swift's Red, Taylor's version, will be out. Woo! 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 Anyway, enjoy part 21. Thanks. Marinette Dupang Chang as Ladybug, 21 years old. Of course, Adrien Agreste would have his car arrive with perfect timing as they stepped onto the street. But somehow Ladybug forgot how dazzling his benefits could be. She focused on him over their shared meal together, so the privileges were almost like a slap back to reality. Thankfully, he was cultured enough to not make the small talk seem as claustrophobic as the velveted cushions as they made their way through downtown, but she'd always been the awkward one, so it's to be expected. I still can't believe this is happening. Adrien turned to her as the car rolled to a stop, and she rolled her eyes. Please, I'm not a gremlin, you know. I'm just thinking of the attention we're about to be harassed with now and for months. You didn't have to say yes, Ladybug said. Raising an eyebrow was her only defense for looking like she wasn't panicking at the consequences of this not date. I won't blame you if you disappear mysteriously within the hour. The door clicked open, and Adrien offered her his hand as he slid out. Or within the next 5 minutes. I know better than to bug out at events. I'm not one of your famous exes, you know. He smiled, tongue between his teeth as he looked away. In theory, you could be anyone under that mask. Considering how many scandals you've had in the headlines, Ladybug hoped he'd take the zing and good fun. I just might be. I suppose my chances of breaking the beloved Ladybug's heart goes up with every hand I hold. He squeezed her palm before placing it on his bicep, speaking through his teeth as several faces around them stared back with raised eyebrows and rounded lips. Is that why you're having me feel up your muscles? His celebrity smile broke for a moment as he snorted, then repaired itself as he turned to look at her. I see you're an opportunist, LB. Ladybug stumbled on the red carpet, leaning into him to steady herself. She hadn't prepared herself for that comeback, and now her face matched her dress, and her gloves, and the carpet. Well, at least it'll look like she had expensive makeup on when Getty Images uploads their shots within the hour. Please, you wish. It was the best comeback she could come up with her heartbeat distracting her. For once, Ladybug welcomed the photographers swarming about. It's hard to talk with blinding lights, so she flashed them a smile instead of continuing their conversation. Like the gentleman gossip rumored him to be, Adrien Agreste proved to be the perfect escort. From introductions to delightfully polite ways to slip away from small talk, Adrien led her through the night and through a mirage of what could have been. Her and Adrien. This could have been her life, with sparkly bracelets and paper white smiles. Sure, Marinette was successful, but an Etsy star seller couldn't compete with run into Raph Simmons on a yacht level of success. She'd never been on a yacht without a mask, unless she was serving the kind of clientele you don't make eye contact with. The thought made her feel out of place as a server avoided her eyes as they held a tray of flutes, followed by that swirling feeling in her stomach that made her nose taste funny. Anxiety. One of the many reasons Ladybug didn't attend events like this. They made her lightheaded.
Thank you,
Adrien cut in, grabbing 2 glasses before handing one to Ladybug, then wrapping his free arm around her waist.
I appreciate it.
Still smiling, he led her to a patio, leaning close to her ear like he had a secret until they got outside. Adrien? Ladybug looked up, surprised to see concern in his eyes.
Are you okay?
What? Oh, yeah, totally.
You looked like you needed some hair.
Oh, no, that's... She stopped herself as he held his expression. Oh. And here she thought she'd masked it pretty well. Kat could usually tell when something was up, but even Alia didn't notice her masking. You're, pretty observant.
It comes with the territory.
Of being a celebrity?
Sure. Yeah. I know what it feels like to have all eyes on you and feel out of place.
You'd think I'd be used to it by now, she said. Ladybug leaned into the railing as Adrien slid his hand away.
Being famous?
He suggested. Being... She couldn't find the right word. Idolized.
Don't get used to it.
Excuse me?
People who develop god complexes from being worshipped are the worst.
Adrien fiddled with his champagne flute, looking at the bubbles before looking back to her. I mean, I have actual godlike powers, so... He snorted, a sound he'd never make in front of a camera. It was a side of him she missed. A side of him she got robbed of when their relationship tore into that of an idol and civilian 3 years ago.
Idol or not, if your man doesn't worship you, he's a fool.
That's kind of a toxic mindset, but I appreciate the intention, Ladybug said, trying to not think about what he said about her to Marinette.
Hopelessly in love. I suppose. But if you settle for anything else, I'll be mad.
I'm sure whoever I end up with will love me dearly.
They'd better.
Adrien returned his attention to his glass.
If it's anything less than that, I'll beat them up.
Ladybug laughed. The men in my life need to stop threatening to beat up my romantic pursuits.
Is that what I am?
He straightened.
A man in your life?
Touché. She returned his eyebrow wiggle by rolling her eyes. Speaking of being in my life, how's Nuru doing? Adrien looked down at his suit jacket, then glanced at her.
Ask him yourself.
Ladybug gasped as a purple streak tackled her, and she looked around for extra eyes. Adrien, she hissed. We're
on the balcony without cameras.
He raised his glass like a toast.
You can thank Gabriel Mastineff for that one.
Ladybug blinked, trying to remember where she heard the name, then shuddered at the implication. I don't know how to feel about that.
It's useful for refuge.
I'll give you that, Ladybug said, brushing her hand against the Kwame, hugging her cheek in affection. Hello, little one. Adrien smiled, gentle and soft, and nothing like his magazine spreads as Nuru chattered updates, flying wildly as he gestured his little arms. Of all the Kwames, Nuru was the one she didn't know. Well, him and Plag, but she got to see the little guy on occasion, and Cat Noir never stopped talking about him. And I like your dress, Nuru said, all but panting as he tried to catch up on every detail about everything in his life that had ever happened, ever. "Thank you," Ladybug said, lips pursed into a tight smile so she didn't laugh at the little bug. "Cat Noir was at my place the other day, and your friends sure didn't have the decency to not stare." Adrien snorted, lifting his glass as the drink jostled so it wouldn't spill.
"Oh,"
he said. "What?"
"I can imagine it, is all."
He leaned against the balcony as he glanced at her. Her heartbeat cursed his silhouette. Millennium-old Rugrats staring with wide eyes and shushing the other squeaks because everything is entertainment after living in a box?
"Yeah, precisely."
"How much has Cat told you about the Miraculous, anyway?"
"You mean Kwame's and the like?"
"Yeah."
I know the important stuff."
Adrien nodded to Nuru, floating between them, looking back and forth. "Oh, yeah. Right. He had one of his own. Oops." "That's good." Ladybug felt the breeze shift, stirring the air between them. "He's actually quite good at that kind of stuff."
"Updating?"
Adrien raised an eyebrow as he looked over at her, and she laughed. "No." Her heart twinkled as she thought of him. "Explaining things."
"Explaining?"
"He's, like, super patient. Well, not all the time, but whenever we get a new team member or something scary happens to civilian, he..." Ladybug grinned down at the concrete. "He always acts like the hero or partner you'd want for Paris. You know?"
"He does?"
"Yeah, like..." Ladybug sighed, flushing at outing herself like this. "Sometimes all I can think about is zipping away, or Rena Rouge would try and get photos, or Carapace would pose with any kids. But Cat Noir? He'd be with the ambulances, wrapping those orange blankets around the victims, or making sure they had a place to go home to, or finding them a place to stay if they didn't want to. You know, he..." She swallowed. Oh, how she loved her partner, and in so many different ways and types. He's the one who set up the post-attack suites in the Bourgeois Hotel. I don't know how he did it, honestly. He lives in a shoebox, but he did. He had a contract signed right up until we... She swallowed, realizing who she was talking to.
"Until you took down Hawkmoth,"
Adrien offered, his voice even. Yeah." Her gaze returned to the concrete, but without the grin.
"You can say it, you know."
"Oh, right. I wasn't..."
"Ladybug."
She felt his hand on her shoulder and looked up to see a sad smile.
"No one has come to terms with Hawkmoth being Adrien Agreste more than I have."
She watched as Nuru flew over and settled himself on Adrien, a gesture of love and soothing. He'd been the right choice after all, as much as she hated to have him be the permanent holder. Right. How embarrassing.
"Come on."
He tossed his drink over the edge, leaning over to make sure the liquid didn't hit anyone as he set the glass aside. "You don't drink?"
"If I started, I'd probably never stop."
"You just take it to not look out of place."
"Adrien Agreste can't control his love life. What would Paris say if he couldn't control his drinking?"
She reached to touch his cheek. "Oh, Adrien." Her heart melted as he leaned into her palm. "When will you escape this life?" The words surprised her as much as it did him, it seemed, because both of their eyebrows shot up. But she'd say it again. Her heart was too tender for this man to let him drown in the ocean of the public eye.
I'm not sure what you mean.
He stepped away, leaving her hand with nothing but air to touch. I hope you find some girl next door someday.
Yeah?
He looked at the ground now. Yeah. Her heart ached with every word. Someone who would paint your bedroom your favorite color.
I wouldn't let that happen.
Ladybug sighed. That's what I mean. You need someone who's willing to do nice things for you themselves, not with money.
No, I mean, I wouldn't let her paint the walls my favorite color.
Excuse me?
We'd paint them her favorite color, obviously.
Ladybug blinked, feeling something palpitate at the romantic implications. Together, you mean? Adrien stilled, his eyes searching as he thought about it.
Yeah.
He looked down.
That'd be nice. Painting a room together.
Do you like painting?
I'm halfway decent at art.
No, silly. Ladybug set down her glass and closed the distance between them. Painting, like, rooms and furniture. Some people like it, others hate it. He took another step back, and she pursued.
I don't know.
You don't know?
I've never done it.
Ladybug stopped, not matching his steps. You've never painted?
Off of a canvas? No. This rich boy.
Canvases were expensive. The desk you've had since elementary school that you carved a cardcaptor's quote into because you ran out of paper? Priceless. Oh, Adrien! Ladybug couldn't help but laugh at it. You're missing out! He looked around, like there was someone on this patio he chose specifically for seclusion that could help him. Listen, do you rinse your brushes when you're done painting?
Excuse me?
When you're done, do you wash out your brushes?
I mean, while I use them, but...
She pursed her lips. Have you ever used the same brush for multiple projects? Adrien scratched his head, all semblance of the charming, model-perfect masking he did at the start of the night gone.
Maybe? I don't know.
Oh, Adrien. She placed a hand on his shoulder. You need a life coach. He scoffed, shaking his head.
At least I know that mushrooms aren't actually supposed to be washed before you cook them.
Excuse me? She took back her hand, her smile matching his.
Yeah, it's like impossible to dry them. You're supposed to rub them on a cloth.
You're joking.
Who needs a common sense coach now, LB?
He winked, and she laughed. Okay, fine. So tonight I learned that Adrien Agreste hires out housework and home decor, and that I owe Cat Noir an apology. He stilled, masking on a smile.
For the fake boyfriend.
She made a frog face, widening her eyes and flattening her smile. Oh, yeah, for that too.
What else is there?
I shamed him for not washing the mushrooms the other night. I think I told him he was no good in the kitchen. It's fuzzy now.
And you two are just friends?
Oh, please, not you too.
You made dinner together the other night, apparently.
Adrien stepped forward, closing the distance.
At least, you made mushrooms.
He's my partner.
Romantically.
There's more than one type of love, you know.
So you love him?
Of course. This conversation felt wrong in her mouth, and she turned away, her back all but pressing against his chest. He reached his arms out to hold the railing, all but trapping her, and pressed his forehead between her shoulder blades. It was intimate, but strangely didn't feel out of place.
Sorry,
he said into her back.
I need a moment.
Lightheaded? She tried. He couldn't hear her heartbeat. Could he? But she didn't want him to move away. If anything, she wanted... No, that's a treacherous thought. She shouldn't like this. But she did. This moment, this person. Her heart screamed in betrayal, but... Ladybug turned, and he straightened, not looking at her until she touched her hand to his cheek. The gesture startled him, but they locked eyes, and she remembered what Taylor Swift said about how love like this burned red. That's what this was. Burning red. Treacherous. Trouble. An ex she'd never get back together with. But how are you supposed to walk away from heat like this? He felt it too. She could tell. From his gaze to the way he swallowed. Hopelessly in love with her. No. She couldn't do this. Something about it felt like betrayal. Not to herself, oddly enough, but to Cat Noir. Cat Noir was real. This was just a guy escorting her. So much for having a night to just be a woman who could flirt without worry. If this continued, she'd be the one screaming lyrics about mosaic broken hearts in a month. She should leave. They should go inside where there were other people. But then Adrien put his hand over hers on his cheek, and they both swallowed. She'd be smart to walk away. This was trouble. This was reckless. Oh, how she liked it.